Over the last 30 years, 40,000 people in the UK claim to have been taken by extraterrestrials or had experience with UFOs. The following are two of the many such cases. Northamptonshire, England. The first story took place in southern England, November the 22nd, 1978. 50-year-old Elsie Oakenson left work at around 5:15 p.m. and she left the town of Daventry in West Northamptonshire in southern England and decided to drive home. And when she arrived at the village of Weedon Beck, she turned right onto the A5 and saw a brilliant red light on the left-hand side above the road, followed by a brilliant green light on the other side. Her initial thoughts were that it was an aircraft which was going to fly over her head and crash. But she soon realised the two lights were attached to a grey dumbbell-shaped object which was above the road. She estimated that the object looked to be about 50 feet wide and was about 100 feet above the road. She continued on her journey and drove underneath the object. She then continued her journey to Church Stowe in Northamptonshire, where she lived. As she looked back, she could see the object was still there, and its lights were flashing green and red. She came to a part of the road that was covered with trees, and she remembered driving under the trees, but didn't remember driving out. Suddenly, the car was stationary, and everything around her was pitch black. She didn't know where she was, and she knew she was in the car because her hands were on the steering wheel, but she could not see the road, the trees, or any buildings. She could see absolutely nothing, not even the car. She sat there and wondered where she was, but she wasn't afraid. Suddenly, a brilliant white circle of light about 3 feet across shone onto the road to the side of the car, then switched off before everything went black again, and then another circle of white light, exactly the same as the one before, shone down in front of the car. The light then switched intermittently on and off in a circle round the front of the car, and then went back in a semicircle, continuing to switch on and off to a side of the car, before shining onto a cottage on the side of the road. The light went to the front of the cottage. Elsie then realised that the light had come from above and was completely circular. She couldn't see anything and didn't know why they'd come or where they'd come from. She suddenly found herself driving about 30 yards down the road, just as she'd been doing under the trees. Her journey had taken 30 minutes, where it should have taken her only 15 minutes. Somewhere along the way, she'd lost 50 minutes of time. When she finally arrived at her house, she pulled into the drive and noticed that the kitchen light was on, indicating that her husband John, a policeman, was at home and was preparing the evening meal. When Elsie got inside, she said to her husband that he wasn't going to believe the story, before running upstairs and looking out of the bedroom window to see if she could catch a final glimpse of whatever it was that had been out there, but also knew that something odd had occurred. Elsie worked at the Daventry Teacher Training Centre, and the following day she mentioned to a number of her colleagues about the strange events. One of the people there suggested that she may have seen a UFO and that she should report it to the authorities. Elsie was unfamiliar with the term UFO and knew absolutely nothing about the field of ufology, but she soon would. Her eyewitness account of what she'd seen appeared on the news, and on Friday the 24th, the Elsie Oakenson case featured in the Northamptonshire Chronicle and Echo. Oakenson subsequently underwent hypnosis and went on to describe what had actually happened that night. Two figures appeared that looked grey against the glow, and she called them ghost-like beings because she didn't know how else to describe them. It was like a ghost with a head on top and a kind of body and tail that seemed to come towards her before going away and was no longer there. Then another figure came to the other side of the light. It looked like a person with a sheet over its head. There was the head and arms and feet, and she thought of it as being another ghost-like shape. She found the palms of her hands were becoming very warm and her fingers started tingling. She went on to describe how she left work to drive home and saw a brilliant red light over one side of the road and a brilliant green light over the other side of the road that was attached to something grey. She thought it was an aircraft that was very low, but as she got closer to it, found that it was actually stationary. It was grey smooth and plastic looking and looked perfect against the darkening sky. It was a dumbbell shape with two bright lights underneath. She had no idea what the object was and had never seen anything like it. It wasn't an airship, a helicopter or an aeroplane, and she felt no fear, just curiosity and strangeness. She got back into the car and drove further along the road, but a car which had been serviced that day before suddenly malfunctioned. She changed from second gear to third, but instead of going faster, the car was slowing down before coming to a stop. The light had completely disappeared, and she couldn't see the road, the trees, or any buildings. She could see absolutely nothing at all, not even the car she was sitting in. She suddenly saw a circle of brilliant white light, and then that light went out and darkness returned. Then circles of brilliant white light shone in a pattern on the ground from left to right, and she looked through the windscreen to see where they could have come from, but everything was black. Then she suddenly found herself driving towards home. Elsie Oakenson was either abducted or was about to be abducted, but she never described what had actually happened to her, whether she was taken aboard a craft. One theory she put forward was that she believed that she may have been rejected because of her age. Elsie later became involved in UFO movements, where she joined a witness support group to help counsel people who had undergone similar experiences. She also became interested in psychic phenomena. Dorset, England. In September 1990, James and Pamela Millen were camping in Dorset in southwest England. At around 3 a.m, James suddenly woke up and noticed a number of orange balls of light dancing in the sky in the field next to them. He quickly woke up Pamela to point them out to her. The couple found the orange balls hypnotic, and James quickly grabbed his camera and jumped out of the tent in order to take a photo of them. Neither James or Pamela were very clear about what happened next. When James returned to the tent, he believed he had only been away for a few minutes, but then noticed a pile of cigarette butts at Pamela's feet. They both decided to check their watches and found that the time was now 5:40 a.m. Somehow they'd lost 2.5 hours. Later that day, they had a vague recollection of what had happened to them, where James was able to recall an incident where he was lying on his back on something cold. He is in a circular-shaped room, as being attended to by a man wearing white robes. He did not know what the man was doing to him, but somehow felt that it was something beneficial. Could it be that James was the only one to be abducted, as Pamela waited for his return while smoking, hence the cigarette butts, though it appears that she did not remember smoking them? It is strange that James was able to recall some of the abduction, but Pamela had no recollection of anything other than the orange lights in the sky.